right, everybody, welcome to today's interview session. We have with Mr. Thomas Chua, and I think Thomas is someone that I've wanted to interview for quite a long time, right? I've been hearing about him from someone who was in a full-time job, right? Built a side hustle, quit, right now doing this full-time and enjoying himself while doing it as well, man. So I think this interview is going to be exciting for many of you, right? So yeah, Thomas, before we begin, bro, thanks for coming on and share a little bit about yourself before we begin today's interview.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I love your energy. So just a bit about me, right? When I was extremely young, I took on a scholarship by the government. Which paid for my education, lah. In Singapore, exchange, hostel, my laptop, so on and so forth, while giving me an allowance. But the thing that came with the scholarship is not exactly free, right? I have to work 4 years to serve my bond out. So at the third year of my bond, I guess that was when I started my side hustle, because I was quite clear that it is about time for me to start pivoting out already. So the reason for me to take that scholarship, right, was back then, money was extremely tight, and I really wanted to just focus on studying, maybe focus on basketball as well at that point in time, which is why I took on that scholarship. Plus, I didn't want to touch my portfolio. So I started investing at around 17 years old. And so I've been building my wealth for quite some time. And back then it was all about trying to reach that financial independence as early as I could. So I didn't want to touch that sum. And so, in return, I have to serve out that 4 years. But, the moment I signed that bond, I was actually quite clear that that job wasn't exactly for me. But it was more of a defensive move, because I guess I needed that stability. Because since young, both my parents don't work. So, it has always been work, study, work, study, work, study. And so I crave that stability. And I'm very grateful for that stability. When I was in uni. So third year, when I was trying to pivot, whenever I do things, I always try to think of how I can find that unfair advantage, right? So maybe just to share, like, the way I get scholarship, or the way, I try to do things even in school, is I have to do things the unorthodox way, right? Because when you look at your peers, for example, they will have a lot of social capital for those who come from a slightly wealthier family. So you always have to do things a bit differently, because if you just fight head on head, grades with grades, right, you will not win them, because they have that social capital, right? Not just more resources for tuition, so on and so forth. But when it comes to building up your own social capital, for example, like when I want to apply for a scholarship, or when I go for interviews with all the universities in Singapore, like, I will find out who the interviewer is. I will go and read their research paper, and then, like, during in the interview or during networking session, I'll go and talk to them. I find your paper, point A, point B, point C, very interesting. Would you care to discuss? And it is really through this kind of unorthodox way, which this author called Alex Bunyan, I think, he calls it the third door, right? You can't always find your entrance to the first or second door, then you have to look for the third door. So for myself, I knew since a very young age, around 17, 18, I really love investing, right? Because there's a lot of mental exercise right there. And, in investing, you're actually paid to be curious. So transiting, while I have a finance degree from NUS, I knew that transiting out would be difficult, because during that time, it was COVID. Plus, usually people want to have, they want to hire someone from the industry already. So that was when I started trying out different things. Like one, I went ahead to meet a lot of folks from the fund management industry. And then second thing is, that was when I started writing online. So that was when I started blogging out my thoughts. Yeah, and the internet is really a leveler, right? The thing with a lot of institutions is that there's going to be a lot of friction, a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to trying to get opportunities there. But to me, the internet is a fair battleground. Like, whoever is able to articulate their thoughts, or whoever have the best ideas, or whoever is able to write their stock research analysis the clearest, you will get that opportunity to meet someone great, or you will get that opportunity to network. So as I was writing, initially I started writing, just to get a job at a fund management industry. But eventually, when it grew, when there was a demand for my writing, that was when I started, hey, maybe I might be onto something else here. And one thing I learned at a very young age is that, while it's good to have a goal, but when it's time to pivot based on, changing circumstances, and the opportunity set was changing, because ultimately, writing online gave me the power to tap on really limitless leverage. Right now, my audience is like unlimited audience, and there was this opportunity for me to actually break the relationship between money and time. So right now, like let's say my business model right now is I write a research report super in depth, and then I charge my members an annual subscription fee for it, right? For every incremental subscriber I get, I'm not working additional hours, right? So in that way, I'm able to scale limitlessly and break the relationship between time and money. And so when I saw that happening, when I saw the demand that I was able to get eyeballs, and at the same time I was able to get to speak with a lot of remarkable investors from China, from US, from Europe, so on and so forth. So I began to think back as to why I want to join a fund management industry in the first place, right? And it was really to number one, get to do what I love, which is to do investing, do deep work, and really analyze companies. Number two is I want to be able to learn from other investors. And having an audience on both my blog and my Twitter account, they are already providing me that kind of very big opportunity whereby I get to speak to a lot of fund managers without having to, work in a job per se. So when I did that, that is how I arrived at where I am today, whereby I'm doing this just full time. Every day morning I will just analyze, write, and then afternoon, that's when I speak to people like yourself, or I speak to other fund managers just to exchange ideas. Yeah.
Wow, and I'm going to share. I think out of all my interviews, I think this was the most powerful, lesson-packed introduction I've ever gotten. And I'm getting three main ideas, right? I think that's the audience. I think number one, right, was I think you really go against the usual societal view that to build your own business side hustle, you must really like burn all the boats, right? For you, right, you say, hey, your priority is get the stability first, right? Get the bond, right? Work for it, and then, right, you can go and do what you want. Number two, right, is I love the fact that you're freaking resourceful, right? You weren't thinking about having you weren't thinking about complaining about like, hey, right, why do someone else has something that I don't, right? But instead, what can I make the best, right, of my circumstance, right? Using the third door, that's a great concept, right? And then going for it. I think third thing is that having that clarity of that end game of what you wanted and being more than okay to adapt, right, to pivot, right, to changes as well, which is a very powerful thing, because sometimes people tend to be a bit stubborn with the one way to get there. But I think a big lesson I'm getting is that you are very flexible in getting towards where you wanted to go, right, which is what helped you out with what you do. So I guess moving with that first question, right, is it seems that you have a lot of like clarity, right? You say even when you're in school, right, all the way to even at the end, right, where you realize that what you wanted, right, did not have to come from a fund management role, but actually through, right, your current gig, right? So how do you like, when did that desire, right, for that professional personal growth to do what you like, right, start for you, right? And how do you get about like getting that clarity of your desires, right, over the years in your journey too?
Yeah, so I mean, if I were to describe my journey looking back, right, it may sound like I have a lot of clarity, but I guess a lot of time is, I will have a goal, but once I reach that goal, then that's where I decide whether I want to pivot or not. As to the motivation, right, I mean, I guess largely because I come from a family whereby both my parents stopped working at a very young age, right? And so as a result, I started working early on, working while schooling. I sell ice cream, cashier, give flyers, waiter, so on and so forth. And when I read the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure a lot of your readers read before, it is a very good why book, but not a very good how-to book. So it gave you a very strong reason as to why you need to break out of this cycle. And one thing that really struck me back then was the concept of rat race. When I read it at 16, I could just see my future. Like if I continue doing what I'm doing, then, I'm just going to, continue this cycle. I'm never going to break the cycle. And it wasn't difficult to see. I mean, I can look at my parents or my relatives, or even just even my seniors who have go on to graduate, go on to further their education. When I look at that isn't the kind of life I want to go after, because ultimately I think if you live life just to pay bills, so on and so forth, then I think it is a rather sad life. And so since then, that was when I really try to think of how I can break out of the rat race. And there's ultimately two ways, right? One is you become an entrepreneur, right? And then number two is, you find a job, you constantly underspend your income, and then, you just reinvest the rest. And then, your wealth will just grow from there. And, I was never really super entrepreneurial. And so I opted for the second option. And being able to do what I'm doing today is actually, I would say it is a huge privilege, right? That I'm able to do it, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. But the thing is, um, for those people who are born into a more well-to-do family, you have that privilege, then that's good for you. But for those who don't have that privilege, then the way to do it is really to build up your capital first, and then really earn that privilege. Sooner or later you'll get it. But the thing I see for most folks out there is I think they forgot why they are trying to make that money in the first place. I see quite a few of my friends who have a lot of money, like a million or so, but they are still stuck in that mindset whereby they need to keep on making more before they are able to live the life they want. Which I guess, like, when you hear of people talking about financial independence, retire early, whenever I hear people aspiring for that, immediately the idea that pops in my head is that they hate their life. They really, really hate their life at the moment. And to me, it is always okay to find a balance, right? Why not find something that is sustainable, you love doing, you're growing at the same time, and then you become really good at it. Usually, once you become really good at it, the money will follow. Yeah. So basically, yeah, a very, very long answer to your to your question.
Yeah, but I love the that mental model, right? Of instead of like going crazy and just like hating what you do and just trying to save your way towards retirement, right? But how about finding something you enjoy doing, and then the journey becomes a lot more sustainable, a lot more enjoyable, right? To the point, like what you said, like it's not like to the point where even if you don't have to work, you still continue doing just because you love it, right? And I think that's a lot more fun, at least for me. I think I agree with you on that perspective as well. But yeah, so I guess moving on to the next question, right? So we talk about some of your background, right? How you quit your job, right? How you build your own side hustle, right? You got a lot of viewers, you met fund managers, right? So it's very easy to see all the highlights and achievements and milestones, right? But one thing a lot of people I think don't realize is there are a lot of downs, a lot of challenges, a lot of obstacles along the way as well. So throughout your journey, right, all the way from when you first started saving your money, building a side hustle, all the way to right now what you're doing, right? Enjoying what you do, loving what you do. What do you think were some of the biggest challenges or struggles, right? You felt that you faced, right? And if you want to share a little bit about how you address them, right, along the past couple of years as well.
I mean, if I were to go all the way back to when I was in my younger days, right? I guess the really big challenge back then, and I guess as a result of that, until today in my life, I would say that I am quite resilient. I wouldn't call a lot of things I'm experiencing now challenges, but the biggest challenge back when I was a kid, I mean, it was really money to put food on the table, and then getting electricity, because electricity was always getting cut, so on and so forth, right? And then generally people will look down on you when your family is in that kind of situation. And I guess it is really true that very early childhood experience till like maybe I was 17, 18. That was when I started getting scholarships. Yeah, since then, I mean, the challenge as to starting something like what I'm doing now basically just requires a lot of effort and a lot of discipline. So the most people would not do it because you don't see results at the start, and then they just gave up, or the habit don't continue. But to me, it is always about getting into that feedback loop, right? So I mean, at the start, writing content, right? You can, no matter how good your content could be, you'll be writing into thin air. So but you just got to keep going at it, right? And then interacting with the bigger accounts, and then eventually your account will grow, so on and so forth. But I wouldn't really call them super big setback per se. I've launched marketing campaigns, all this, which don't really have results. But I mean, to me, it's really just I just have to iterate, modify, iterate. And if I find something that works, then I just double down. So I mean, it has been quite fun. Even when I was applying for scholarships, all this, I was accepted into 4 or 5 scholarships, and all the 3 local universities. But I mean, there was definitely a lot of rejections behind that, because I basically just applied to all the scholarships in Singapore, which is probably about 50 scholarships. Yeah, so I went for a ton of interviews, but I've never really taken rejection as a personal hit to my self-worth or anything, because I guess back then I had real problems to think about, which is the money aspect and so on and so forth. So a lot of times, like whenever I meet challenges nowadays, I don't really see them as real problems. In fact, like the moment I hit a problem, then I try to think of solution. In the Myers-Briggs quotient, I'm an INTJ, so I don't really have the feelings part. I don't really feel down or sad very often. I mean, to me, when I see problem, I just fix. When I see problem, I just fix. But if I were to really try and think back on the super hard days, it is just the money problems very early on. Other than that, I'm actually very grateful for my life where I am now. You know, being able to surround myself with people like you, Max, Kelvin Sito, so on and so forth. Very high performing, very driven individual who's always looking to become better. And I think being able to hang out with people like that, like yourself and all of them is really I consider it a blessing, and I think it's as good as life can get because I get to do what I love now, and you know I hang out with people who are able to bring my average up. Yeah.
Wow, those are kind words for me. So anyway, thank you for that. All right. So I think when you mentioned about like I'm just going to look for solutions, right? Like, why do I dwell, right, on all the big issues, right? And I love where, I mean, for you, you use your background and say, hey, I have bigger problems to think about, right? Why am I like, why do I want to dwell on this mistake? And just let me just keep going with the solutions and just keep going for it. So I guess from what I'm looking at, right, it did seem that on some level, right, you had quite a bit of what I guess the word is called faith, right? Like, you know that eventually you'll get the results, right? Was it that mindset you had already from starting your first article, your first research, right? Or is it something that you felt that developed over time, right? So how was your mindset or your perspective like at the point of time when it comes to having faith? Because sometimes you don't see results, feel a bit demoralized and whatnot. Or for you, was it like you knew that you could get there, just about a matter of time for you?
So whenever I start on a new project or when I try and start a new side hustle per se, the number one thing I go to do is I go and study the best performers in that field. And for writing, it is really maybe David Perel, Dickie Bush, so on and so forth. And they will usually publish out their thinking, and I really spend a lot of time studying what they do, and really try and work backwards how they become where they are today. And so when I first started writing, I wrote a wide spectrum of things. Right now, I'm a bit more focused on just writing investing content. But when I first started out, my biggest hit was actually how much allowance I give my parents. Is business school worth your time? So and so forth. Those more personal development topics, more life related topics. But it is when we are first starting out, right? It is about trying to find where your strength is, where your niche is. And then there was success in other aspects, but there eventually I needed to focus and double down on something. Yeah, so it is really a lot of trial and error while I try and reverse the process of very successful people in this field. But I actually started out super wide spectrum. I even wrote about sports, about basketball, so on and so forth. But once you are able to find your voice, once you're able to find something you're good at and possibly you can monetize, that's when then I string my focus. So initially it was quite a mess. It wasn't like or immediately I write about money, then that worked, but I was still trying to find my voice back then. And once I found the market, then that's where I put my focus and really just double down on that aspect.
Okay, right. So what I'm hearing is really a lot of like more. I think number one, what I mentioned is modeling, right? Like why you want to do it alone, right? Just find the best. I think what I mentioned, Dickie Bush, right? David Perel, wonderful writers, right? I know they're very active on Twitter, right? And then just learning from them, and then right, modeling and applying for yourself, and then eventually something will stick, right? And something will work, right? And do you what made you realize that, hey, like what you're focusing on, whether it's investing, right? Talking about Alibaba and some of the stocks, right? When you realize that, like, or how do you know that that was something you could finally focus on? Was it based on just the market in terms of likes, engagements, or is it based on your own internal like a gut, right, and mindset as well? Like, how you want to share a little bit about that period of time?
So I think number one is if you want to be really successful in what you are doing, it must feel like play to you, right? I'm sure you heard of that Naval quote. You got to do what feels like play to you and work to others. So I mean, writing about research report, it really feels like play to me. I love doing it. I love discussing with other investors about it. And we always have to go back again to, it's one thing that I love to do it. It's another thing if there's value received by other people. And there's always a lot of data. So the moment I started writing, the reason why I took the harder path to use WordPress is because I wanted Google Analytics, right? I wanted to study data. So I'm a very data centered person. Every article I look at, I will go and study, whether the numbers are coming in, which country they are from, what topic they like. And sometimes the best way to know what to write also, it is just to ask your readers, what do you all like to write? I also track what kind of content becomes most viral. In other words, most amount of people share that content. And when I publish something like Alibaba Deep Dive, for example, immediately the first week it got over 100,000 views. Then that's where I know that there's actually a demand for writing like this. Then that's where I double down on my content. So I guess even as as a sole proprietor, or they call it solopreneur, it's very important to always try and estimate what the market size for your work is. And doing this, it is great because there's practically not much cost on my side. Like my margins is probably 95%, just 5% credit card bill, and then everything else just flow all the way down to profit. And it is actually not very difficult because I love doing this. Is that data is readily available with Google Analytics. And even when I create content online, it is a lot about analytics. I'll be studying what works, what doesn't work, and then I'll be doubling down on the type of content that actually works. So it is really through this kind of feedback loop, then I become better and better. Then I hone the craft from there.
All right, nice. I think one thing that even I'm learning is the power of data analytics, right? To the point of like looking at the data, right, and making a decision based on that, right, instead of like through feelings, gut, or intuition, right, which is what a lot of people tend to be familiar with. So I guess probably one or two more last questions before we move on to more of the finance portion, right? But yeah, I guess when it comes to monetizing your channel, right, or your emails, right, where we had a subscription right now, and also usually launch an investing course, right? Was it something that was very like natural for you to do, or was it something that took a lot of time? Share a little bit of your purpose. Initially, I guess was just maybe getting a bit of income from ads, right, and whatnot. But when you actually chose to monetize, right, can you share or carry through a bit of your thinking process of how did that come about and what happened when you actually go about doing it?
Yeah. So oh man, I don't know if I should share this, but I started the monetization. Initially you are right. Like I will do maybe I'll go speak at events, then maybe they'll pay me a few $1,000s just to speak for 30 over minutes. And initially I was just publishing my articles out there, right? So there was one time whereby there was one guy who was trying to hire me, but I wasn't that keen. And then he told me like, you want to do this alone? But I don't think you have what it takes for people to take their credit card and pay for your service. Wow, when I heard that, that was when I immediately start monetizing my services. And there is a demand for my work, right? The demand is actually quite big. So so much so that I'm very self-sustainable right now. And the scale, the amount of impression I'm generating on a monthly basis is north of 5 million impression, and I'm not paying a single ad at all. So the amount of viewers on the platform, so on and so forth, is huge. But yeah, so that was, I'm grateful to that guy for saying that to me, because I took action like immediate. It was immediate action. I went to learn about the system, how to maximize, optimize for the cost. Because writing on a few platforms is going to be expensive. Like Substack, for example, they'll take 10%, then credit card will take 5%, right? So for me, I'm a very hands-on guy, and I'm really looking to optimize the structure from scratch. Yeah, and so that was when I started out my premium subscription, as to like people get access to my research report. And this is really the first time I shared it online. I think when was the guy? The guy probably told me like 1 year, 2 months back. Yeah, so that was when I immediately turned on the monetization phase. Yeah. The running of course, I didn't really wanted to do it. I like to teach. I definitely do love to teach. I was actually working out with a few polytechnics on teaching investing, but it was tough because they didn't allow me to have my running my steady compounding blog at the site. So my research service, steady compounding, they don't allow that because government career. And they call that moonlighting, and so I didn't do that. And eventually this year, that was when I met Max, right? And when he talks about teaching, his eyes really just light up. Like that was the passion. He really have a very, very strong passion for teaching, and I guess like being in this, he's a professional speaker, right? So back then the idea was, wow, this guy, he loves investing, he's great at investing. I mean, when you look at his track record, it's insane, right? Achieving financial independence at such a young age. So investing wise, we are aligned, and he is a great speaker. And that was when I thought, like, same thing, like with the internet, we actually don't need permission from any institutions in order to do something. So I mean, if teaching at at a polytechnic would be a problem, I can't run my research services at the site, then why not I just go online and start teaching? And again, the demand right off the gate was just huge, right? We have students from like 17, 18 countries, and I was actually really touched because we run the class 6 sessions, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Those who are in Australia, they are staying till past 2 a.m. And those who are in the West Coast of America, they actually start at 5 a.m. So they actually woke up and stay until that late in order to listen to us. And the feedback at the end of the course was just insane, right? People were very grateful, like they took back a lot of value. And so like so that's how I started writing the research service. I've done that for about 1 year, 2 months now. And then the teaching of the investing course, it just ended like 3 days ago. Yeah, so that was the first time I ran it. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. So like both projects, it is just a lot of fun for me. And when it is fun, naturally I will become better over time, because I'm a person who try to really improve and iterate on how to become better every single day. Yeah, so it is just a lot of fun and improving.
Yeah, I sense a lot of like enjoyment, right? A lot of fun, right, from both what you're doing, right? And obviously, kudos to the guy that kicked your butt, right? Because I think without which, right, we wouldn't be providing so much service, right, through our research reports, right? So sometimes about taking those criticism, negatives, and just switching something positive, man. And this was a huge one. So regarding and this is something additional, right? Like when it comes to writing, right? Because honestly, as you know, right now there's a mass information overload, right, in today's world, right? A lot of people are writing articles, right? There are AI copywriters out there, right? So I think for you, could you share a little bit like one or two tips about how do you approach your writing style to have such high quality articles, right? That can really like attract people, that actually be useful, right? And besides what I mentioned earlier about the data analytics portion, because I think a lot of people could do like way better, right, if they actually could improve the quality of the writing, right? Could you share like maybe one or two tips from your perspective as well?
Yeah, so to me, right, whenever I think about my style of writing, I always work backwards, and you really deserve the audience you try to attract. So I will never use clickbait title or clickbait techniques. Because the caliber of audience you attract, it is usually one-off. And running this research service, I want to attract long-term investors, people who are interested in the fundamentals of the business. I don't want traders. I don't want people who are FOMO, so on and so forth. And so I never use clickbait title. Short-term wise, it is painful because clickbaity title, it definitely brings in traffic right off the bat. I also don't use SEO. SEO, search engine optimization, means you spam a lot of the keywords in your articles so that it actually surface up on the Google search page, which is why sometimes when you run a search on Google, right, for example, you run return on invested capital, the first option, they're not going to do a lot of it's not going to do a very good job of explaining to you what the concept is, because they are just repeating return on invested capital, the ROIC, ROIC, ROIC over and over again. You're going to see very repetitive. Probably like the first 5 paragraphs is just going to be rubbish. And so that is not what I'm trying to do. To play the long game, right? To be known for your branding, to be known for your online branding, first you must always put value out there. And when I first started, I didn't write based on what was the hottest topic. It is always about timeless content, because I believe timeless content over time, it will have this flywheel on its own, because people will just keep reading and people will just keep referring it to other people, and you really want to put out your best value out there. So for most writers, right, I would recommend not putting up a paywall that early. In fact, you should be putting your best content out there for free, because you really want your blog to be the source whereby people will refer to their friends and family to come and read, because it is actually helpful. On Twitter, you have to be a lot more succinct. So I mean, it is one thing to, know your stuff. I know a lot of very, very smart people out there, but when they publish their stuff, nobody reads because writing short form content, it is much more difficult because you need to deliver that impact. You need to deliver that value with much less words. And it is really about forcing yourself, cutting aggressively. So whenever I write something, I spend a long time cutting out excess word, and usually there's a lot of words that could be cut out. So one thing that for most people to take away really is to always put your best value out there online, because your audience will know if it's BS or not. If you always take their attention for granted, they are going to leave you and never come back. So I put a lot on focus on reducing churn. That means I want those audience to keep returning whenever I publish something. Then the second thing is, if you respect your audience, your readers' time, then you really want to make sure that that the content you publish has very little fats. By the little fats, that means like if the word is not necessary, then you just take it out. Because a lot of times when we write report, right, again, it is going to be a lot of useless words, so on and so forth. But when we are writing, we want to write to communicate. And maybe the third thing, it helps to be entertaining. So the way we are taught in school about writing, right, is a very boring, monotonous way, right? Writing report. But the way to write and captivate your audience is to write as though you're speaking to your audience directly, which I think you do, right? Whenever I read your Facebook post, it is very long, but it keeps me engaged. I actually read from the first line all the way to the end, which I'm really impressed because it's very long. Yeah, so I mean, that way it's not easy, but again, always write as though you are speaking with your friend. Otherwise, the readers usually will lose interest very fast.
Yeah, I think thanks so much for those tips, man. I think what I mentioned about reverse engineer, right? About the branding you want, right? And timeless content, right? Instead of being too clickbaity, right? Because eventually people might lose interest, or the type of audience you might attract might not be the kind of people that you want. And thank you for sharing so abundantly, man. I think that was a very good, powerful tips to actually get folks there. Probably a last question, right? It comes to about a side hustle, right? Before we move on to a few other topics, is so when you first started, right? I mean, you were generally unknown, right? Nobody really knew you, right? You just keep on pushing content. I think you say about basketball, right? Even some other topics. So what were some of your, how do you actually, what do you think some of the things you did, right, that really like made that point of, oh, then people are starting to notice you, people starting to realize who Thomas is, right? Like what do you think happened? Or do you think it was just a lot of just consistent work, and then eventually one by one people started to know you, and then the flywheel effect, exponential effect happened? You want to share a little bit about that portion, or maybe marketing, especially for folks who are watching this that might be starting out new, nobody knows them, right? Maybe one or two tips that could help them out as well.
Yeah, so you always have to, I mean, while there was a lot of luck involved, but it helps if you're always creating your luck. And so I mean, one thing is I'm always publishing content. Usually when the content really has a lot of value, right? Like people is able to take action on your advice, and immediately they are able to see results. That content usually will sell itself because it's free, it's actionable, people are able to see benefit. Then the other aspect is probably very early on. I reached out to a lot of existing influencers, and the way you want to reach out to them is, okay, so even now, right, when people reach out to me, they are usually asking for favors. That is definitely the wrong way to do things. So every time I reach out to network with other people, you always want to make sure you are familiar with their materials, right? Then they will be slightly impressed with you. And it should always be from a viewpoint whereby, how can I value add person? How can I help that person? When people see that, you have what it takes and you are a helpful person, you're here to give, you're not just here to take, then they will be more likely to help you, return the favor. And there was one concept I read from Influence by Robert Cialdini, right? And he shared this concept. There was this charitable organization, and the way they get a lot of donations is first by giving their target audience a flower, for example. And then as a result, because human have a tendency to want to reciprocate, right? And so the urge to reciprocate is actually very real. So when you reach out to people, you provide them value, you try and help them however you can. Usually they will bring you opportunities. And that was really how I got maybe exposure to more accredited platform, maybe the Singapore radio station, or or even Sydney Personal Finance Festival. So basically try and, first is you always need to be doing the work, creating your content, giving value to other people. then maybe, to get spotted, you can consider reaching out to bigger accounts, bigger influencers. Usually it helps to just find someone slightly above you. I mean, it is okay to aim very far, but usually those people, their attention span is even shorter because there's like 10,000 people reaching out to them. Yeah, so then from there, step by step, you'll be able to climb slowly. Yeah, it takes time, but it will work if you always put in the effort, always put in the work.
Oh, I love it. I think number one, I say actionable content, right? So instead of just, yes, all theories are great, but if you actually can think of one or two things you can take action on and get some instant feedback or results right away, right, that could help a lot. And I think number two, like I said, right, give value first, right? Find out people who might have influences, but really not about what I can take from you, but what I can give and help you out with it as well. All right, great. I love it. So I think I love the first half, right? Talk a lot about how you build it up. Right? I think thank you for being so abundant in sharing your tips, right? What you did. So I guess the next question, right, is I'm sure over the years, right, you've probably interacted with a lot of different investors, traders, right, people in finance, right? And I guess you probably observe that there are different people, right, who can take in the same amount of information, read the same report, right, go for the same course, same work, right, same program, right, and achieve drastically different results. Some of them can move very fast to get all the results they want in a short period of time. Some of them might be stuck, right, might be average, might still get a bit mediocre even after months or years, right? So in your own observations, right, Thomas, right, what do you think are some of the difference in characteristics of like what they do, right, mindsets, right, that differentiates the students that go very fast, right, get good results, sustainables, and those who might still not be at the area of where they were like in life and investments?
I think a few aspects. When it comes to following through on projects, I think I have a very strong habit muscle inculcated in me since a very young age. So when it comes to finishing my projects or chasing after my goals, I usually don't have a problem. But the way to get started is first you always must think about what is your why, right? Why are you doing this? If you don't have a strong why, usually if it's just going to be something superficial, usually you won't be able to finish it. So like, I mean, if investing, you maybe just want to I don't know, get rich, for example. I don't think that is a very strong why, but if you're trying to change your family life or you're trying to change your life, break a generational cycle, then that why would be much stronger. Then number two is I'm a big fan of James Clear work, Atomic Habits, right? When you're trying to inculcate a habit, and this I apply it to every single aspect of my life. So like if I want to develop the habit of journaling, for example, on my table there's only my keyboard and my journal. That's all. Like it's empty. So whenever it really reduces the friction, and it really puts what my priority is, right? So when you're trying to build a habit, always make sure you reduce the friction. And for example, Twitter, all this, while it generates a lot of eyeball, a lot of traffic, a lot of business for me, but I mean, it is a good tool, but it is also a bad tool if I'm stuck on Twitter for too long, like just endless scrolling. So I don't allow myself to really try and put energy into resisting that addiction, right? Scrolling social media, for example. I actually use a paid app called Freedom. I think the website is called freedom.to, but on the app store it's just called Freedom. What it basically do is I set up a system from maybe like, okay, so for my timing is 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. I can't enter social media platforms, and then I'll go to the gym. Then maybe after that 2 p.m. to again 5 p.m. I can't enter the social media platform again. So I don't let myself be subjected to wasting energy on trying to pull myself away from social media. I just cut it off altogether. Yeah, so I try to design my life in such a way whereby one, a very little friction, and two, I don't really have a lot of distractions in my life. Because whenever people say no time, I'm quite sure they do spend time on Netflix, they do spend time on whatever it is. It could be drinking, it could be whatever. I mean, there's a lot of addictions out there, a lot of distractions out there rather. Yeah, so you want to set your life up such that you're not subjected to the pool of all this distraction. Then maybe the final thing is it helps to surround yourself with people who are trying to achieve the same thing. So like if you want to start investing, find someone who has an equally strong why, then become accountability partner. And then just try and always keep in touch, keep each other in check, because after all when you're doing it together with someone else, it is usually more fun and you're more likely to persist with that habit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think wow, those are damn powerful stuff, right? Some of the things we actually talk about, right, through our content, right? We're about having a big why, knowing clarity of why you want in the first place, right? We also talk about being I think there's this word called indistractable, right, by this author called Neil Ayal, right? So being able to wipe out the noise, right, of being distracted, right, and being just focused on what you want to do, right? Now, of course, we talk about optimizing your environment, right? The people you hang out with, right, and getting accountability, right? So I love those few tips, right? Because I think those are what I call underrated strategies. A lot of people always go after the investing tactic, the investing strategy, but we actually don't focus on the implementation, right, or the application, right? I think you tend to struggle with that as well. So I love it. So I guess next question, so now moving on from that productivity, a little bit of implementation, right, to the part of the finance, personal finance portion, right, which I know you have got experience in and expertise as well. So just share a little bit, like, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes, right, people have when it comes to, let's say, saving their first $100,000, making it, right, and yeah, some of the tips you could have for people, let's say they just graduated, right, if they actually want to get the journey of making or saving their first $100,000 for themselves.
I think okay, so for me, I never had the problem with saving money because I'm quite easily, because I came from a very low base, so I'm really very easily contented in life. But the best advice I've ever gotten from is the author called Safety Ramit. You know, I will teach you to be rich. He gave this really brilliant advice, right? It is not about not spending money. I spend a lot on traveling. So before COVID, I'll go Japan twice a year, Thailand 2-3 times a year, and you know, a lot of other countries. Like I will go New Zealand, so on and so forth. My travel expenditures is usually like $10,000 to $15,000 a year. But you need to know where you want to spend your money on. You know, so you should, you know, identify what matters to you, and those things that don't matter, then you have to wipe them out. So like, you know, I mean, some people like to spend money on restaurant, that's fine. Then you, something else must give, right? Those things that are lower on your priority list, let's say traveling, for example, then you should have to wipe that out. But the thing is, I think a lot of people they cave into what brings them most joy, and yet at the same time they give in to all the you know, the social pressure. Like the friends ask them to go out for drinking, even though they don't really enjoy it, they still go for it, for example. Then that is a problem. The thing with saving your first 100,000, because I think my why was exceptionally strong, so I managed to save the first 100,000 very early on. But there is really not much secret to it. If it is something that's important to you, you will do it. Yeah, so before I save up to my 100,000, I actually don't spend as much as I am right now. So I mean, early on in life, I was a very big saver. There's a few things I don't do. I don't drink, and I don't gamble. Like even until today, Chinese New Year, all this, nothing. I will not play the poker card. Or until today, I don't know how to play the poker card, and I will never drink beer. I mean, long time ago, I used to tell people I'm allergic, right? But now I will just say that it's because it is a hard rule I have in life. Again, I think it is because when I look at my family members or my relatives, right, I guess a lot of their life is destroyed by these two sins, right? Not just two, like maybe three, right? Alcohol, cigarettes, and then gambling. So to me, the best way to quit an addiction is not to start at all. And so I made a very hard rule very early on in my life. I think it was secondary school. I already tell myself, I swear that I'm not going to touch these three things. Yeah. So I mean, when I don't engage in clubbing, I've never been to a club before. Yeah. So when you don't engage in all these activities, right, naturally the money will just pile up. And then when you know, and then you pick up investing at a skill, you are able to compound your money at double-digit percentage year after year, right? Then over time, your wealth will just build up. And you know, it is really through this process whereby, you know, money swell up. I put money into the stock market, I grow my money. That's when I earn my privilege to be able to do something that I love. Because I mean, there's definitely risk with me going into this. On hindsight, it is actually quite okay. You know, like there's already demand, so on and so forth. But still, I mean, looking back, there is definitely risk. And the thing that enabled me to take this risk is really, you know, building up the wealth early on in life.
Yeah, wow, I love it, man. I think I like how you told folks that hey, I was allergic to beer, but it's just an easy way to say no, right? I think saying no, right, to achieve things that you know you don't want, but being pressured, whether it's by family, friends, the people around you, right? I think that is a very big skill that we want to learn if you actually really want to achieve our financial goals, right? And I think of course having a big why, right, is great. And I think what you mentioned about being intentional with your spending. I think a lot of people don't actually mention that, right? So they say you want to go for travel, great. What is the trade-off you're willing to make, right? If you want to eat shit, then what is trade-off? So I think being very intentional, right, with your savings, right, where you want to spend your money on, right, I think it's a very powerful tip as well. All right, so I guess probably the last final two questions, right? I know we're running out of time. So I guess right now, so this time is April 2022, right? The market is a little bit choppy. I know recently you went out, so this time of the interview. So I guess just curious, right? What are some of your views of the market right now, right? What are your thoughts, right? And maybe a little bit of your approach during this period of time, right? Just want to get a sense from you too.
I think, okay, so for me, right, my investable cash is I'm usually 100% invested. But when it comes to emergency fund, this is where many people may not agree with how I do it, but I keep up to 2 years worth of expenses, right? Because I guess it is a result of my upbringing. I'm a bit more defensive in nature. I don't believe in market timing. So no matter how bad the crash is, I don't invest my emergency fund. 2 years because I want to be resilient. I want to be anti-fragile. Like nothing will shake me out of my position, because I'm convinced like if you are able to hold very high quality companies in the short run, the market may not agree with you, but over the long run, eventually the share price will catch up with you. I will never put myself in a position whereby I get shake out of the market. So I don't leverage. I keep 2 years worth of expenses. And when it comes to looking at all these macro conditions, right? Yes, they are real. They are very, very painful, but they don't impact all companies the same. Like, I mean, we just take inflation, for example, right? Companies with pricing power will generally benefit, right? Because first, for example, I mean, we just look at Hermes or Louis Vuitton. The material cost that goes into this product is minimal, but what they are charging you for is really the branding, and they can easily just pass off not just inflation, they will pass off even more than the inflation, and people will be happy to pay for it. So when it comes to investing, right, you always want to look for companies that are anti-fragile as well, because every single crisis, right, there will be a group of winners that become stronger over time. I mean, just like when we look at '08, right, it is the Amazon, Google, Facebook that became stronger right after the event. And likewise for the COVID crisis, you also see a group of companies that were beneficiaries of the COVID. So when we look at the situation around us right now, number one, whenever there's a crisis that hit, I will go and stress test my company. I'll go and look at their balance sheet. Do they have enough cash? Are they able to meet their interest payment? Are they able to make use of this crisis to reinvest into the business, to take market share from all the other business, all the competitors who are unable to reinvest during this time? Because for some reason or another, when times are good, they did not conduct themselves in a very conservative manner. For example, like there'll be always a few companies who takes a lot of debt during good times to invest, buy back shares, so on and so forth. And the returns on their reinvestment during good times is not exactly high. So companies which are not very disciplined during good times will suffer. But there's always a group of companies who conduct themselves in a very proper manner, who have a very high hurdle rate before they look at what to invest in. And you really want to invest into this group of companies who not just can survive, but are likely to come out stronger as a result of the crisis.
Yeah, I love I think this is very good goal, James, but this is really shares your entire thought process, right, about approaching the entire market volatility, right? So people who are watching this, right, you might want to take some notes, right, and maybe rewind back to what Thomas just mentioned. But I love that it's a very structured, right, a very clear, right, way of how to approach the investments. And so yeah, I think probably just add on the last question. I know running out of time, right? So how do you approach that level? Was it something very natural to you in terms of like how systematic you are in your thinking, right? In terms of your game plan, right? Not just in terms of investments, right? If you observe, right? I realize it's not just even your productivity, right? Your mindsets. How do you actually get so like structured and like methodological in how you actually approach some of your actions and your strategies towards some of the major areas of your life?
So I mean, I guess because I'm an I'm introvert by nature. I'm very introspective. So I spend a lot of time reflecting and writing down, journaling down my thoughts, right? I actually have a few journal. I mean, one for each thing I'm working on. So I mean, I have one for investing and then one just for personal development. That's where I write down, your gratitude journal and what you're trying to work on, so on and so forth. And I have one more for health, which is really just to track the stuff I eat and the exercise I do. Yeah. So basically, I mean, I believe that only by writing down and looking back, and you always go back again to data, right? You must always have results that are measurable. I will track my fats percentage, weight, so on and so. I track a lot of things, and then it's really then again, when you look at the results, and then you look back at your journal, what have you been doing? Then you try and analyze like what have you been doing wrong? How do you improve your process? When it comes to investing, it took me quite a while, I guess, because I didn't have a mentor at 17 or 18. It's really like myself and the library. And then after that, I went to work at Bloomberg, but even when I work at Bloomberg, the folks there don't really know how to invest. They are more speculating than investing. So even when I joined financial institutions, I didn't really get what I want. It is really through reading Warren Buffett letters, and I actually read I'm quite certain I read every single book in the library about investing. And then you try and pick out what makes sense, what doesn't, and you filter from there. And over time, through a lot of introspection, a lot of work, assessing the results, then that's where you're able to know like whether you're on the right track or not.
Yeah, well, I love that. I think a lot of reflection, journaling, right? And then just really being very data driven, right? So even lesson for me, right? Sometimes I tend to just move fast, right? But I think that the grounding, I think I'm very grounded in the sense that you're always basing a lot of decisions on data, right? Reflections, right? And that's how you're able to have not just success, right? But sustainable success, right? I think way more than a lot of people out there that might be just moving very fast, but it might not be the most sustainable thing for them at the end of the day. Yeah, so I guess with that, I think we've come to the end of the interview. So, Thomas, any last words for some of the folks out there who are watching this that might be starting out or still a little bit struggling with their journey of either side hustles or investments, right? And of course, where can they find you, right? In your social media channels as well.
Yeah, so I guess like if you are starting out, the most important aspect to success is number one, consistency. And you really want to start small, figure out whether you like it or not, because I guess for a lot of people the biggest thing that's stopping them is fear of failure. It is not exactly like they are not competent or what. I believe a lot of people are actually very competent to do what they want, but it is really the expectations from themselves, and the self-imposed expectations from other people. Like other people cannot affect you unless you allow them to do it. So for people starting out, it's really just to put in the work and just to start. And if you want to look for me, you can find me on steadycompounding.com. That is also where I run my research service. So like, for example, the biggest problem I hear from a lot of retail investors is that, maybe you don't have time to really read that in depth into the companies. Or, when you buy into a company, you're always shooken by volatility. Like volatility scares you. And that usually comes from you don't really understand the company, right? So what I try to do is, my research for each of these company after they pass my filter usually take about 3 to 6 weeks, and that is when I really try and summarize the best, the key information out there for my readers. And so, like, if you want to jump onto investing, active investing, but you have no idea how to analyze a company, or you don't have time to analyze a company, then you can consider joining my subscription for that. And then for beginners, if you want to learn about investing, and you want to learn from, I think Max was on your show also. Like Max and I believe we are running another cohort in the last week of June. So it will be 6 sessions. It is specifically for beginners. So we'll be starting from basic, all the way from how you read annual report, how you read earnings call, how you assess management, all the way to accounting, financial ratios, and then how you actually value a company, both profitable company and loss-making company. Yeah, so we will be running the second cohort in June. So you can find us on zeninvesting.gumroad.com, which I guess we can put in the show notes. Yeah, and right now we are having the super early bird discount for the Zen Investing cohorts. Yeah, so if your readers are interested, the promo code is actually super early. Yeah.
Nice, right? No, I think yeah, we'll definitely put the links all there, right? For the folks, if you are interested, please reach out, please follow, please subscribe, right? And if you're checking the course, we'll put a link there as well. But yeah, with that, thanks Thomas for a great interview. I think I love really acknowledge you for sharing abundantly, right? Just going all out, right? Sharing your thought process, how you should go about doing it, and look forward to having you just reach out to even more audience and adding even more value, right, to people around the world, right? In the future, right? Thanks Thomas, and thanks everyone for watching as well. Thanks guys.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right.